You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast.
I'm the CEO of Seerbit. I'm currently running this business, which is spanning across Africa. It was quite interesting that we learned so much about how the whole landscape looks like. It gives us an insight of the maturity of the market. I think there's a lot of perspective to financial inclusion. And looking at financial inclusion as a whole, we have to look at what is the financial availability. So for us, technology has been the key driver. If you don't start having those platforms that gives that seamless availability of those options, and interoperability on a single platform becomes a challenge also in the future for the kind of commerce we are trying to achieve for Africa as a whole.
Stay tuned as we bring you inspiring people who are unlocking Africa's economic potential. You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast with your host, Tessa Adamu.
Welcome to the Unlocking Africa podcast, where we find amazing people who are doing amazing things to unlock Africa's economic potential. Today, we have Omoniyi Kolade, who is CEO of Seerbit, which is a Pan-African payment platform built to help SMEs and enterprise companies process fast, seamless, inclusive, and secure online and offline payments. Welcome to the podcast. Omoniyi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me on the platform.
It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I know we spoke a while ago, but the day has arrived, so I'm looking forward to our conversation. So before we start, I was hoping you could introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about Omoniyi.
Yeah, thank you again. So like you earlier communicated, my name is Omoniyi Kolade. I'm the CEO for Seerbit. I'm currently running these businesses, which is spanning across Africa. I'm kind of person that actually just love what I do. And the difference of what we love is the idea behind the purpose of what we're looking at, you understand, as a community or as a business landscape for African as a whole. And that's what is driving what we do. And that drive comes from the element of the kind of market we find ourselves and identifying those things and seeing how much can we contribute. That's pretty much about me. That's Omoniyi Kolade.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. You've given us a great insight in terms of you and running the business. So I was hoping you could go into a bit more detail regarding what is Seerbit, what inspired you to start the company?
So Seerbit is actually an idea looking at what is going to actually empower the future of commerce in Africa. We've seen what is going to the global market. How do you support the infrastructure that is going to actually help the community of businesses in Africa to connect into those global markets? Those are where those key inspiration comes in, right? And Seerbit journey has been operating for a while. And the journey goes back to more than 10, 11 years, where we looked at it from the initial idea where we're looking for an idea where we say creating access for innovation. That means that we feel that if there's no access, innovation cannot strive. It's giving access to something that gives it an opportunity to showcase itself. So that was the idea. And those assets were we looking at it from the point of an opportunity that came then in the time of mobile money, when CBN first licensed mobile money in around 2008, 2007 in Nigeria. We were then actually working on some tools around some products, technology, CRM, identifying the customer's need. And because we had the idea of customers' need and then looking at between what customer needs and then the gap between their needs and where they should be about what they really want, there were each gaps. And if they want to attain what they really want, they need to be empowered financially. We saw those gaps. So we took advantage, okay, maybe there could be the revolutionary direction to take advantage of this license, work with some of the licensees then. So we worked with AfriPay, which is subsidiary of UBA then, worked with eTransfer, worked with quite a number of them in the market then. As an enabler, yes, and some we worked as a technology service provider for them, and some others we worked with them as agency banking, building agency network, you understand, then. And it was quite interesting that time. We learned so much about how the whole landscapes looks like. It gives us an insight of the maturity of the market, even though people were still financially excluded, but at least it shows that there's something that already exists, which is well structured as payment, right? That actually everybody just needs to come with the product, keep plugging in, and then you can use that to scale the market. And while we're doing that, also we had a product technology. We offered one of the, I think, one of the licensee, also which is Fortis. Then we called it lifestyle. And the idea then was to say, okay, we cannot really do much about payment or solving the issues of payment if you don't understand customer lifestyle. And lifestyle means that I cannot really force you out of who you are. A customer wakes up today and decide what he wants to do. The financial service does not define it. I choose to go to which bank or which branch I want to bank with, right? And we felt that, okay, we need to start looking at that perspective that we cannot really force customer into channels, into some of the solutions. We need to go and meet them where they are, yes, sir. And that was the whole idea of lifestyle, where we look at people and look at their lifestyle and see how you can bring banking into those lifestyle. I think we did some tests around it. It was quite interesting. And we saw that it was something that could actually drive inclusion in another area. And from there, we felt that, okay, we were not really going to be like a mobile money-driven country because of the kind of structure and foundations we already have with payment. So we moved our model to start empowering banks as an enabler, where we looked at areas where banks have not really effectively maybe deliver proper services, or the opportunities we are looking at to build technology, partner with them, and get to the markets, you understand, alongside. Because customers who we're looking for at times are already banking anyway. And also realize the banks are already big enough, they're already making revenue. What will make them prioritize your product when kind of limits your potential? So that was when we felt that we cannot sustain this direction, rather than just go out, be the leader of ourselves, and then get our license and then face the market and build solutions we feel we need to build and solve for customers in the marketplace. So just to actually summarize it.
Thank you for that. So you've mentioned that you were inspired by the ability to build a future, and you've been operating for quite a while. You slightly touched on this in terms of changing the customer's lifestyle. How do you see Seerbit contributing to financial inclusion in Africa, particularly for individuals who are unbanked or underbanked?
Okay, I think there's a lot of perspective to financial inclusion, right? And looking at financial inclusion as a whole, we actually have to look at what is the financial availability, because people, one way or the other, they're already banking, either through informal process or formal process. Either they're not effectively banking, right, or they don't have kind of a structured banking, right? So you find people in what they call cooperative. You find people what they call ajo locally in some local market, right, where you come together, contribute your money, anything you make in a day. Some people goes around collect it from the stores, right? All those forms are banking, so they're just an informal form of banking, right? And the whole idea is, when we talk about financial inclusion, I feel it's more, are we looking at digitalizing this customer, right? Are we taking them from a traditional to a tradition? And answering this also boils back to one thing that we need to understand, right? That banking exists, right, does not mean that banking is not effective or people cannot be financially included, right? But understanding the customers, varieties of customers in the marketplace requires that it takes a lot of cost to actually address all the marketplace. And one thing we have realized, and what I've always said, is the potential and the opportunity of every fintech today is where banks has failed or where banks has never been effective. It creates an opportunity for fintechs. So we're just a broken bank that takes a specialty in some areas to make it more effective. So the effectiveness is where we have played also in looking at how do we digitalize business and how do we take them to a place where no customer is different choice when they need to pay them digitally. And looking at that direction tells you that what are the types of payments in different local markets and what are the varieties of popular payment methods that should always be available, so that business, the more they have these options for customer, the more they can actually scale their business, right? Because there's something that is very particular to all of us, which is cash. And that's what we are fighting when it comes to financial inclusion. Cash is the enemy, right? And cash means that there's a limit to what the customers can do when he has to do something directly to pay with cash. That means I can only come and give you cash as a person. So if I want to collect cash for 1,000 people, there's a limitation by geographic, by region, by locations, right? So digitalizing, or a business digitalizing itself and giving the varieties of payment methods makes it to automatically just scale and increase, you understand, the acceptance power, you understand, across more for more customers. So for us, that's what Seerbit has positioned to be, to see that we'll always be available to give customer the businesses, right, the option, the flexibility for customers to bring any types of payment they have, right, to able to actually be able to pay to the merchant. And that's why how we've seen inclusion and our own perspective.
Brilliant. So you've detailed the link between informal banking and the unbanked and the effectiveness of digitizing banking for options and flexibility. So if you look specifically at Seerbit, what role does technology play in your approach to making payments faster and more seamless?
Okay. So I think the common difference between having to deal with cash and also digital payment, right, is the element of the technology part of things, where we're making sure that anything that has to do with technology, its ability to make sure that we can actually scale, create a multiplicity model to actually give scale to anything that has a engagement to businesses. So for us, technology has been the key driver. And technology for us is ability to see the future, ability for us to make sure that we can connect the entity together. And how do we understand that? We're making sure that we can even still connect between offline and online. And that's what the bit part of Seerbit stands for. The bit is like everything that passes computer is zeros and one, and one means on, zero is off, like online and offline, right? So Seer is feature, seeing the feature that connects everything together for payments and infrastructure that drives commerce in Africa, right? And looking at that is making sure that we have technology capability to make sure that we connect all the infrastructure. And this infrastructure are not limited just to only when it comes to the existing infrastructure that exists in the market, but also what are the futuristic solutions that requires in the market. Our future proof, it's what we want to achieve. And it means that as the market keep evolving, customer automatically evolves, right? How do we build technology that creates that adaptability to scale alongside for businesses and customer? And that is where technology has been for us at Seerbit, to make sure we power everything that is needed to actually give that growth for commerce in Africa.
Fantastic. As you mentioned, technology has been the key driver that has allowed you to scale. So, what challenges have you faced during your mission to build and scale the platform?
So I think there are two also that we cannot ignore, right? It's about people because you require people to drive an organization, right? And then you have enough resources, you understand people and resources. And also you have to understand the fragmentation as a continent or even fragmentation as a local market in different local markets as country. You find yourself in some market where Nigeria is quite mature, where we have switching system, right? Where we have flexibility of connecting any new solution or having to control how solutions are being dissected into the market, right? But you go to some market where even the body that governs or manage some of the payment infrastructures, right, are actually being managed by different regulatory body. You see that there's no even connectivity between those infrastructure in the market. Example, you see some markets where mobile money quite very big in Kenya, you see it big in Ghana, but does not mean that the other infrastructure like cards are not still kind of being used. But what they built to create their ecosystem has given them that leadway. But what is the flexibility of connectivity between all these entities is the biggest challenges. And that's why if you don't start having those platforms that gives that seamless availability of those options, and interoperability on a single platform becomes a challenge also in the future for the kind of commerce we are trying to achieve for Africa as a whole. And people, like I mentioned, requires that we need resources to able to learn fast, adapt to the changing markets, and then have the kind of talent and people to really be able to shape the directions where the entire purpose and the vision of the organization is going.
I agree. So you mentioned the lack of connectivity and fragmentation of the continent's infrastructure. As we know, Africa is extremely diverse with varying levels of, say, technological infrastructure. So, how have you managed to address the challenges of operating in different dynamic markets or environments within the continent?
So, I think one of the critical things is understanding the role and the capability you have in the terrain of each local market, right? One of the things we actually look at is also we don't play with how we can decentralize the compliance part of things to understand every region or every market, right? It's actually different and they have their peculiarity. And one thing again that becomes a big challenge when it comes to when I mentioned fragmentation was, let's assume you have over 54 countries where you have different payment rules, different payment types per country. And for you to go to some of those countries, you require to be licensed as different elements by each local market. Now, the cost of doing that is higher. The time it takes to achieve that is higher. Comparing that model to like an European Union where you have created a systematic approach to make their market viable and also give people easy way to scale businesses within European Union, right? Where you can get a license from Europe and you can easily just be available in multiple countries without just having to go to each local country compared to Africa. And also looking at their understanding of how the kind of legacy and the kind of payment familiarity they have in their market, where even if you look at how popular some payments are similar in some market, they can easily introduce a solution and scale into many countries. That does not apply in Africa. For some countries, one of the experience we had to integrate as many as almost maybe 18 integration just to be able to have all the payment methods, all the varieties of reliability of payment, what will give us efficiency, what will give us success rate, just to make sure that we can attain that. Now, if you look at those cost and commitment, it tells you that there's a lot that needs to be done to really fix how Africans should look at building the kind of future we want to build, because the fragmentation becomes a barrier itself. So having to understand that there are a lot of things that needs to be addressed quickly at the regulatory level, and then at the infrastructure and defining how even solutions are being introduced in the marketplace. Some of those designs, once they are well structured, I think we can really move so fast and quicker, because we still require a lot of infrastructure to put us into that global market that we need to be as an African market.
Thank you for sharing. Now, so you touched on the different payment methods in different African countries and the challenges that presents. So what would you say specifically needs to be done or addressed to accommodate the diversity in payment methods across the continent?
That has to do with, firstly, addressing one thing first, like I said, right? The first is regulatory, right? How easy it is to really be able to scale yourself naturally, to move your capability between different countries. That means that if we are going to move faster and where innovations are coming much faster to introduce, to adapt to a market where they are still trying to catch up, right? It means that there has to be a framework that gives that scalability. Like I said, European Union has something where you get a EU license as a payment type provider that gives you automatically access to entire markets that exist in Europe. It's not something applicable yet in Africa here. And then if you're not looking at payment options by different payment types by locality, then we should now start looking at, okay, how are we structuring our solutions or payments are introduced into the marketplace? Is there anything that regulates and defines one of the key things that we should look at from the customer perspective? And what it is we're looking at from customer perspective, how flexible interoperability, accessibility, and ease your start of use. And that means that from day one, if I'm bringing a payment solution into the market, I look at critical things that I feel that should actually give, let's say, seamless, or what we want to achieve in the market that gives customer the flexibility, is also part of something that defines how you introduce products in the market. Then it's easier to really know that once you get into the market, you're already connected and everybody can access you. And there's also a connectivity between one of those solutions to another solution immediately from the ongoing in the market.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. I guess another challenge that is faced on the continent that kind of stops seamless payments is the issue of limited internet access. So how have you gone about addressing this challenge within your platform?
Okay, so for us, there's a limit of what we can do at the infrastructure level, right? Because it takes a lot of parties to really be able to empower that area. And it has to do with regulatory, government, other players, device OEMs, the service provider when it comes to internet service provider. Today, what is the cost of internet itself, right? Look at one of the model, I think the likes of Facebook, even at the point where they've seen that there has to be a point where they can scale their users, where over times you get to use Facebook in some countries for free, just to be able to acquire you, right? And those kind of acquisition model means that you must look at the barrier cost of entry as against what you really want. And I feel that if all the stakeholders start looking at that, there may be adoptions on how fast we can get to where we need to get to when it comes to internet access can be achieved. Because over time, some people will grow economically and they should be able to afford it. But also, some businesses are in business to actually sustain. So at which place would there be a balance? Because if I said the cost of adopting this customer is going to be expensive to adopt him, I'd rather not want to, because it's going to actually impact on the business as a whole. So it's a effort of everybody, not just us. We are already building towards digitalization, which is technology driven, which makes sure that internet is required to achieve some of the payment solutions. And also even a offline solution is still technology driven, right? So
Yes.
all those elements for us still goes back to how the parties are going to come together to make sure that at their own level, they understand what they call growth, scalability, and see how economically they can see how they can build models to really create growth around some of these guys that are seeing, let me say, financial limitations as a barrier to really come on board.
So you touched on some key points there in terms of the work that you're doing in building your own infrastructure and ecosystem. And a crucial part of that is the security built around it. So as a payment platform, security is key. So what have you done or put in place to ensure the security of transactions on the platform?
So for us, I think security is just one of the key things we incorporate from the thought pattern of looking at the customer, looking at your product as a whole. And it means that who is the main customer, and the sustainability of the customer is understanding the customer and what is important to them. A customer, what's important to him is for you to secure his money. Now, using that money across board online, how much can you protect it? Also is the second. Now, for we, number one, let me say we are PCI certified. That means we're payment card industry data protection security certified, right? Which makes sure that anything that happens within our environment is secure and protected on our platform. Also, how we now manage information within our organization actually made us to be certified as one of the ISO 27001, which is the information security framework that gives you that environment, internet environment, because you're actually having staffs and resources building the solution that customers are using. So our data are being moved between organizations has to be also be well secured, right? So we are ISO 27001 certified also. But also there's different people in the value chain when it comes to payment. The banks that issues the card or a mobile money operator that issues the wallet, right? Or a wallet system service provider that offers wallet services or a POS machine, right? Or a soft POS. Or some of these payment solutions are actually being empowered or acquired already. And some of them are already customers empowered from their own infrastructure point of view. So they build their security at their point, because the whole idea of security at times is to give a consent. A customer is giving consent to give me access to actually debit my account. You understand, when I'm trying to do a transaction. And some of those security tends to come from who controls the acceptance solution or the payment options solution. So in the case of example like card, you have a card issued to you by your bank, and your OTP or your security solutions are actually issued by your bank. So when you bring it online, dependencies still goes back to your bank, because that infrastructure actually leverage on them. What we do as a platform is to make sure that while it's doing those things, we make sure that the environment is entirely secure, that nothing is exposed while it's doing that within our environment. So it's a all party you understand involved when it comes to security. It does not really drives it as a gateway that actually makes sure that everything has to be secure, because there are other dependencies.
Insightful, thank you. So you mentioned understanding what is important to the customer and protecting their money is critical. We also know that data privacy and compliance are critical to customers. So I was wondering if you could walk us through how Seerbit ensures that customers' data and privacy is well protected.
Looking at the whole value chain, like I said, of payment, right? It means that there's a part of the person providing the payment solution type that customer wants to use to pay. And for us, like I said, we are PCI DSS certified. That means that number one, we have an environment that is HTTPS secure. That means it's certified. There's a protection layer over the environment of our web when you actually input any information. That somebody cannot come and do phishing and cookie stuff like that around it, right? So it means that within that space, all information is there, it's quite secure. Now, when the information passes through the network, we make sure that no data is actually being kept. They are all encrypted, right? While it's being transmitted. The encryption means that we're not really actually holding any customer data. We're actually voting them to make sure that why they transmit through, when they transmit also, it's not accessible, right? So some other people are not supposed to have access to those information. So it's more about using technology as much as possible, so to make sure that you build that you stand shield around some of the things you're doing.
So you've given us great insight into the infrastructure and technology behind the platform. So if we look more at the front end, what innovations or new features can we expect from Seerbit in the new feature?
So looking at it, for us, I think the whole idea about how we introduce new products, right, is looking at what is the key challenges in the market, right? And how can we actually be a voice to address that challenges? And part of our research recently is just to understand today, there's a reason why we have a lot of customers today that have approximately one of the highest level of failure you find in the market today is insufficient balance when it comes to transactions, right? People don't have enough money to purchase or buy. And those are things that drives those conversations where, okay, how do we build a product to also reduce that point of failure in the marketplace? And yeah, we're looking forward to build something around then where we will actually be launching very soon.
Fantastic. So I guess in order to build new products requires research and a lot of collaboration between yourself and different stakeholders, which moves me on to my next point of partnership. So what is the importance of partnerships between, I guess, you as a fintech company and other traditional financial institutions in Africa to enable that customers get the full value of the banking service?
I think the whole idea, like I said earlier, is if the banks are as good and perfect at what they do, right, there won't be opportunity for fintechs, right? Breaking the bank into small elements in some areas of specialty is what fintech has picked up to push into the market, right? To address those challenges or to really expand the scope of the opportunity where banks does not have capacity or they don't have the bandwidth to address. That's where, and that's why fintechs are actually be really successful, right? And then because they're agile compared to a bank, they can easily go in, see how they want to solve those solutions and push those solutions into the marketplace. Now, if you understand that this is the foundational guy, that means it has to be a clear understanding that there has to be a partnership and collaboration. And each party must see that they are collaborating rather than seeing each other as competitor. And I think that's where we want to get to understand that their skill you will never be able to attain if you don't partner with this. And there comes some level of what you want to achieve in the market without this guy being your enabler. We need to get to that point. It has to be a clear partnership that each other needs each other to actually get or to actually address the kind of common needs that everybody has seen in the marketplace.
Thank you for that. So, keeping to the theme of collaboration and partnerships, can you give us examples of how, say, strategic partnerships or collaborations have enabled you to expand your reach across Africa?
Okay, so let's look at it from one of the markets we were working for, where one of our customers want to attain what they call cross-border, right? A cross-border function where they have customer in like 3 countries. And those countries, they require to be able to maybe incentivize their customers, which are businesses in those countries by the virtue of the environment they have. They are giving example of in the commerce space or hospitality. For us to achieve those kind of cross-border, right, you need to understand that you also need the bank in some areas. You also need the likes of cash scheme. Cash scheme like solutions like Visa Direct that allows you to actually do a cross-border sending, being able to create somebody's account using their Visa card. It's also kind of elements you require to collaborate, but that's just one collaboration. But there are others also looking at, okay, I'm in a country, but I'm actually being able to cater for my customers in multiple countries, right? Then you need a bank, and those banks are kind of banks that could actually even give you what they call sponsoring, what will allow you to pass those transactions through a network. So you realize that there are a lot of elements at times to attain those kind of cross-border functions too. So partnership is what actually drives faster growth. That's the truth in the kind of environment we find ourselves.
I agree. So as you operate in multiple African countries, so how do you manage to understand the cultural landscape within the specific African countries that you operate in?
So I think for us, it's more about learning and learning directly from the locals. And those learning is what we want to bring in to create an adaptation into our own platform, right? And see how easy we can actually use that to penetrate the market. So it's all about being able to localize yourself per each market.
Brilliant. So I guess if we move from markets to sectors, are there any particular sectors in Africa that you've observed to be more inclined to embrace digital payments?
So I think everybody wants to really embrace digitalization, right? And there's a question you asked earlier about the internet access, right? There's a gap between what you want and how to get it.
Yes.
And that space, you find a lot of opportunity also for a lot of people to come and solve and jump into that wagon. Every businesses want to be able to contribute to the global market today because you are building a product to say you are beyond just a certain cycle of customers. They can actually be much more relevant to more bigger customers than where I think I am. And for you to be able to attain that skill, that means you need platform to do that and you need connectivity to be able to connect to those global market. So every market today, I think, wants to really be part of this function. But how they want to get there could be local factors, there could be political factors, there could be regional factors, there could be limitation in infrastructure, and there are others ones. So for us, I think we just have that direction to say everybody within the space is working hard. The challenges are clear, and the challenges can even be bigger than what we think. The kind of limitations getting some of the countries to accept digitization, right? Maybe just all those gaps we have discussed earlier, right? Or how your systems are built into the marketplace, the licensing processes, right? Regulatories and so on, right? So I feel that it's a more deeper conversation than just looking at it that do they want or they don't want to, right? It's about ability to really look at it from the point of the market itself. But we more or less just deal with businesses and make sure that what are the best way we can make sure that we enable this business as quick as possible to get them into the marketplace.
That's great. So you emphasize that everybody wants to embrace the digital payments, which is true because over the last, say, 5 years or more, we've seen a boom of payment platforms in Africa. So what would you say differentiates Seerbit from the rest?
So I think looking at the whole market itself, right? Over times, you can never find one single solutions actually addressing the entire marketplace of yes, but you can find different people having different strategy. So like I would say payment is payment for everybody, right? But what differentiates us is our strategy. What exactly is our focus and what are we trying to address and what's our purpose, right? So this purpose that makes our solutions and our product that makes us different, right? And the approach of how we look at it. So for example, now, I was giving an example of a client that is trying to do cross-border, right? We don't believe that there should be barrier in payment, right? As much as we continue, we want to eliminate barriers of payment. No customer should be different choice. That means in Seerbit, we're looking at there's always a solution and there's always a rail that should always give a customer an empowerment into anything he wants to do. And that has given us that differentiations in product and how we position our products in the marketplace, right? To actually give that element to make sure that there's no barriers as the business choose to move and accessibility for customers of choices to be able to do what they need to do with them. So those are the things that actually makes that difference and differentiate us.
Fantastic. So you mentioned your purpose is what makes Seerbit different and has allowed you to operate successfully in the past and currently, and I guess looking forward as well. So when we look at the current situation in terms of what's going on in the digital payment space in Africa, are there any trends that you're seeing that you're currently excited about?
I think there's so much different trends in the whole area of blockchain this time. We've seen so much people trying to use crypto to address payment barriers to remittance and different kind of functions, right? But I think if we were to take a step backward, right, one thing I think payment is required and most important thing is identity. If identity is not properly solved, there's going to be huge barrier to payments. Because today, if I need to send you money, Adamu, today, right?
Yes.
I want to know what send money to Adamu and who is Adamu, right? And the knowing you is your KYC, and that's your identity itself. Because if there's no identity, I cannot send money to Adamu. And so we have to understand the foundations that drives this engagement. So the future lies within identity itself. Because once you can build something that automatically gives everybody easy of identity to know who is who and is already being certified by its KYC, then we'll resolve entire payment problem somehow at the global level.
Interesting. Thank you for that. So I guess if we look past current trends and look at the future of Africa, how do you see the future of digital payments evolving in Africa over the next, say, 5 years?
I think what is going to address that 5 years landmark, right? I'm not sure it's going to be the product introduced. It's going to be also around regulatory.
Yes.
We've seen the after that's coming in, the PAPs, seeing how they want to connect all the banks for interoperability for payments across different countries, which is being driven by PAPs. You also understand that those are the things being agreed, maybe at the African level, And those are where we talked about policy, because once they have those agreements, right, then you see that you can actually drive commerce within each other. And those are things we're taking, things that will fast track like payment is going to be how policy that gives a common or a neutral common approach to everybody will make things really move faster. So the future depends on a lot of things. And those things are the things I feel that is going to actually help us see clearly what's possible and what's not possible.
I agree. So if we look closer to home, where do you see yourself and Seerbit in 5 years' time? What role will you be playing in Africa's digital payment space?
Yeah, so for us, we feel that the future of payment in Africa also depends on us. And that means that there's so much to be done and there's so much that has not been done, right? If that is the case, that means we really don't really look at 5 years' time. You understand? Every day, it's as important, you understand, to us than looking at tomorrow, which is not yet come, right? And the problem is always clear in our face. So we just want to take it as it comes and then see how much. Because finding ourselves in some of the market was not even we being intentional in some of them. It was being driven by the needs of customer, right? And those needs have shaped us and see where we are finding ourselves. So at times we don't really define the entire directions of some of this year. We use problems to actually redefine where it's possible we're going to be. And we've seen how big the problem is. And we always say that the bigger the problem, the bigger the opportunity. So let's take it and move on.
Amazing. I love that. The bigger the problem, the bigger the opportunity. Fantastic.
Quote of the week.
As people, we often have quotes, mantras, African proverbs, or affirmations that keep us going when times are challenging or when times are good. Do you have one that you can share with us today?
Yeah, for me, I think I wouldn't say it's like a proverb, but I would say it's like a belief, right? Where you're looking at it from the point of we act mostly on what we believe, and we can only believe on what we know.
I like that.
More or less, you can never act beyond what you believe, and you cannot believe beyond what you know.
I agree. Thank you for sharing that with us. That's one we've not had on the show, so brilliant. As we've come to the end of today's conversation, do you have any closing remarks, final calls to action for people who are interested in digital payments in Africa or people who are just interested in what you're doing at Seerbit?
Just my final comment is I feel that there's so much that needs to be done. And I feel that we should start focusing on the challenges and problems rather than just really looking at product itself. The product itself, it's an act of trying to solve a customer problem or a customer journey. So looking at it in a bigger scope, I think will really help the entire market to actually drive towards the common goal everybody wants to attain. And also my last word would just be for everyone that wants to come in, it's quite a good place. I think payments quite, I call it the lifeblood of commerce. So if something is the lifeblood that drives commerce, that means it's more or less like the foundation. So and foundation is required. Yes, it's quite the most important thing in anything you look at, buildings or whatever it is. So I think it will be important for more people to come and play in that aspect. And for Seerbit, I think, like we said, we are trying to empower businesses to contribute to the commerce of Africa. And we are open actually to partnership to enable more businesses to reach out to us and see how we can help in any way to empower them. And thank you very much for your time. Just a last word, believe and push the limits.
Fantastic. What a way to close today's conversation. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today. It's clear that Seerbit's commitment to financial inclusion, transactions, and tailored solutions reflect the dynamism and what is happening on the continent with regards to digital payments. So I'll be keeping a close eye on what you guys are doing, and I'm sure you'll do amazing things in the coming years. So fantastic. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you very much for having me. Cheers.
Thank you to everyone who has listened and stayed tuned to the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, or tell a friend about it. You can also rate, review us in Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcast. Thank you and see you next week for the Unlocking Africa podcast.